secondary research, it would end up counting towards that, or it could count as an elective for health outcomes. Like if you can't take like KPP, that could replace it. So that's what he told me. But what frustrates me is that everybody else gets to take 9 credit hours, and I'm taking 12. So
well, next semester you can change that. Now at least you know. So next semester I can just go.
Yeah, now I know, because for sure next semester I'm gonna be taking 2 stats classes.
Oh yeah, that's true. I think we're okay. You're not gonna take the methods class next semester. Okay,
Wait, how many credit curriculum hours are required for this again? Is it 18 research and 12 discipline? 9 in the directed research. Oh, there's more. Okay. So that would be interesting. All right, sorry. Continue.
You're fine. Okay, so you guys figured out what this true means, Marie? So what this means is we've made all these statements. So we say if this equals if this and this are this, and this is 1, and if they're this, this is 2. Well, we've done that for everything we need, but we might still have entries that are, we probably will have entries left over that aren't in any of these categories and that we don't want included in any of these groups. So for basically true means unless these further statements are true, or if it's not true, then this is what true tilde 6 means. So everybody who doesn't fall into one of these categories that we've set is going to be placed into 6.
Why does it say C1:6?
So that's going to come in just a second. So we've just done our case 1 statement, right? So case 1 ends when we say true tilde this. So that's our case 1. So we're closing our case 1 statement with this parentheses. So now we're doing comma levels equals C1 through 6. That's because we had factor over here, because we want to turn this variable into a factor instead of a number. So we don't want R to treat these like numbers, because if it treats these like numbers, then it's going to give us, mean and median for this variable race center, which is meaningless, right? We wanted to treat these as categories. So we say factor everything in this case 1 statement, and the levels, or the order that the factor goes, is 1 through 6. So whenever this data is presented in our data set, the order it's always going to be presented, unless we tell it to do reverse order, is going to be 1 to 6. And now when we try to run like analyses, like descriptive statistical analyses on this variable, R will give us descriptions of this variable as a category rather than as a continuous variable. So that's what the 1 through 6 means. Here on BMI, it's a more straightforward, because we're not actually making it into a whole big variable that we're using. We're just using it to set the 0 through 1. So over here in SAS, you have to do all these through formats, which are right here. So this is a little bit more complicated code. We don't have to worry about exactly what this says. She'll go over this in lab with you. But that's what we're doing over here, is where just like she created this variable right here, where she's saying if your BMI is within this certain range, then this is your BMI group. And then she's taking these 0, 1, 2, 3, the group assignments, and saying what they're named over here. That's what we're doing over here. So we're saying if your cases when your BMI 0, 1 variable are less than 18.5, then your BMI variable, this variable right here, is going to equal 0. If your BMI is less than 25, but not less than 18.5, then your BMI group is 1. Same for less than 30. Everybody else, so basically everybody who has a BMI greater than 30 is in group 3.
Is this your way of categorizing what each BMI falls under? So like first category, second, and then 0 is like your initial?
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. I will actually say, I'm realizing right now this may have created a problem. So the way if I run this right now, if anybody's missing their BMI variable, they're going to get put into this 3 group. So they're going to get labeled as obese. The way I have this written right now. So what I actually need to do is go in here and say if BMI is greater than or equal to 30, then, oh wait, I don't need that comma. Then
They would be obese.
How do you put this squiggy sign?
How do I assign this? This is
No,
basically.
how do you write the squiggy sign on your computer?
How do I, oh, the squiggly sign is in the top left corner of your keyboard.
Oh.
And
You see it. Okay.
Yeah.
So are you using these characteristics like BMI and like age? Is that given to us from her, or did you create this range?
So this right here is the standard BMI range. Like you can
Right.
from
That's what I figured.
stuff, but like this is from her. So these are matched the assignments that she gave each of them. So yes, these are in your the document that she said that's talking about the assignment.
Okay.
But was 4. Okay. So that's going to be that. So now group 4 is going to be missing.
I'm literally willing for us to complete all 4 assignments before the end of the year. Like, I just want to get this done now.
Yeah.
And just like turn it.
I could see them possibly allowing you to get it incomplete on this class if you needed it, primarily because you don't have the coding that is really required for this course. Like, I don't know why that wouldn't be a prerequisite for this course. And hopefully they'll fix it for future generations of students. I'm sorry, y'all gonna be the guinea pigs.
Yeah.
But then this one over here is where we're taking all these BMI categories we just assigned, and we're turning them into the words that we want to actually appear on the table, right? Because if we just put a table with BMI 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, it's not going to make sense to people. So now we're taking that variable we did and we're turning it into this variable called weight. And this is going to be a character variable with each of these options here, as far as, and then obviously for t, since we said t equals 4, it's missing, that's going to be missing right there. So that's just another variable created. This, again, we're creating a factor rather than just characters. So we have to make it our levels. And since this is a variable that does make sense having levels, we put it in a specific order. It's the same with hypertension. So we've created a hypertension variable here. We've created a variable for the fasting glucose, although I don't know if that one is actually required. I couldn't quite tell. We've got the smoking variable, which is again all the exact same. So all these are the exact same format. They just all have different numbers here depending on what the variable is and what your options are going to be. But anytime you're creating a variable based on another variable, it's basically going to look exactly like this. We've got gender, and that's all the variables we have to create for this data set. And then just to make some of them easier to work with and to look better in some of our tables, I renamed some of these variables. So what you want it called goes on the left. What it actually is called goes on the right. If you want to name a variable something that has a space in it, you have to make sure you add quotation marks, or that it's this one right here. It's on the same key as that tilde. The squiggly line is called a tilde. This is on that same key up there, but those can also go on either side of your variable name when you're adding a space. Okay. But otherwise, you can't add spaces into variable names. And if you see over here, you also can't add spaces into data frame names. So you have to use underscores and avoid special characters and that sort of thing. Your data frames and your variables can start with a number, but you're always going to have to put it in quotation marks whenever you're referring to it. So I tend to avoid variables names that start with numbers just to keep it easier. Okay, so then here's where creating vectors might come in useful. So I created a vector called cat_var. These are all the categorical variables. And cont_var, these are all the continuous variables. So in my later commands, I can tell, rather than having to list out all these variables, I can just reference cat_var and it will operate on all of these variables. All right, now we're actually getting into the fun epi stuff here, the real stuff that we need R for. Okay, so one of these first commands in R is the summary command. Hold on, hey Daniel. All right, my computer's about to die because this thing is so old that, so I just have to run upstairs real quick to grab my charger. Okay, sorry about that. All right, let's see here. So just to get a quick look at the data, we could run this command summary on the data set we created called data. That's obviously just a very basic bit of code. We're in R Markdown, so we can hit these buttons right here to run it quickly in each chunk. But this is a command that you can just use to sort of get a lay of the land of the data that you're working with. So especially if you've never seen it before, the summary command is pretty useful.
Real quick, the R comma include true, did you type that or it's
Yeah. So in our Markdown, these things are called data chunks. So this little section is called data chunks. So you see how this right here, this is just free text. So this, if I were to knit this document, would just be basic text. This is the code that shows up.
I can't see what you're pointing at. I think it froze.
Okay, can you see now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so that's highlighted right here. This is just the regular free text. I could do my analysis in R, type it all up in R, and it'll stick it into the document. This is called a code chunk. So you see these three right here. These are those three apostrophe looking things up on the tilde button. Or you can hit Control Alt I, and it'll automatically enter one. So Control Alt I. We'll put in a code chunk, and this is just where you're basically just entering your regular R code. What these things up here are telling R how to incorporate that code into the document. So include equals true tells R that we want whatever data we tell R to print in this code chunk to be printed.
So we would put that before we process our data, like summarize it.
So for the summary data, we want include equals true. If we were to set this to false, include equals false, it would not print this summary data in our data set. It would print other code chunks, but it would not print it. So that's what include means. Message equals false and warning equals false. These are to tell R to not include the messages and warnings that it gives you when you run those code chunks. So like if you maybe make an ambiguous statement, even if it works, R will give you a warning that, hey, maybe there's a better way to make this statement. Or there's lots of little warnings that R will give you where your code isn't technically wrong. There's just maybe something that could have been better. And then message is just the general message that pops up in your console down here. So message equals false and warning equals false tells R to not include anything in your console down here. So if you look at that Word document that I created, because it says include equals true, this table is included. Because it says message equals false and warning equals false, none of the messages or warnings popped up in any of this code. But then because it says echo equals true, the code is included. So one of the things that she asked for in the assignment is for us to send her the code. Well, R has automatically included it with each table that was used to create it.
Oh,
that's why right here it says echo equals true. All the code is automatically going to be put into the document.
Okay, great, because we want that included because she does ask for that code to be in that document. Okay,
Correct.
great.
Yeah. When you're doing, you know, obviously your overall professional looking document is not, you don't want that in there, but for learning purposes, yes, we want that in there. So we've done our summary of the data, basic summary command. So you can see how, you know, these commands can get a little complicated, but a basic command is super basic. It's straightforward. So let's say we wanted to just do certain variables. We could nest a select command in there, making sure that we add our extra parenthesis, right? Because now we have two commands. So we could nest a command in there, and we could say that we only want it to do age. So what we've done here is our internal command select, we said select, we want select to operate on the data set data, and we want it to choose age. Pretty sure I got this right. Let's see if this works. Yep. So
that
now
would just
it
choose
only did age. Yeah. So you see how that's how you kind of can nest your commands in there.
If you deleted that nest, would that go back to the previous table?
Yes. So if I delete this, and I got to make sure I delete the select command too. It will. Go back to the table.
Okay.
Yep.
Because she wants all of those, but if she had asked just specifically for age, we would just put select age.
Well, so this one is not a particularly useful table for her purposes. I'm going to show you how to make a table that is better suited for what she's wanting. This is just a way, I wanted to show you the summary command mainly so you could get a glimpse at all of the data in your data set without having to like run the data set or do anything like that, just to get a general summary of it all. So this is more for your insight rather than actual presentation insight.
Okay.
So here's a quick way to do a table for a single character variable. It's this table command. This $sign right here, whenever that appears, that means that whatever to the left is the data set, data in this case, and whatever to the right is the name of a variable within that data set. So in this case, it's weight. So what this command is saying is make a table, this table command, of all the options in variable weight within data set data. So that's what this command is saying. So it's telling R, go into data and look at weight and turn it into this table right here where it's got the counts of each of the options within that data. So this is basically a frequency table. But we may want to make a variable for multiple character variables, just like she wants. And this is actually from that, from a special package. This is what I was saying is not like base R. This is one you have to download a special package for because somebody's already taken the time to write a function for you to create all these different variables in there.
How do we know which package we need to load?
That's a great question, and sometimes I don't even know because there are so many of them. It will tell you. So if you're running a command that that has worked in the past but is not working now, it means your library isn't loaded yet. Like maybe RStudio closed and it unloaded all your libraries.
Again.
Okay.
Megan,
yep. I got it. Okay. So sometimes I can't even remember which commands go which packages. Sometimes what I do is I just load all the libraries that I can think of, just in case. But if a library isn't installed or loaded and you try to run that command, it will tell you that it can't find that command, and that will tell you that you need to go and install or load the library that it's a part of. If you can't remember what library it's a part of, you can type the command into your help over here and it will tell you what library it's in.
So which one will we need for these purposes for like creating the table for the multiple variables?
So those are all at the top of this document right here.
That code that you showed us earlier, install packages?
Yes. So all these libraries, everything I've made in this document, this is all you need is these libraries right here. So this is from a library called PubH, Public Health. And that's what we're using there.
So are we going to have access to this once we upload the code that you send us?
Yes. Yeah. So
Okay.
if I'm going to send you this file right here that has all this code.
Yeah.
I'm going to send you this file, and the only thing you need to change is this.
It's
Once
what?
is this document pathway.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because we're gonna of course save the ERIC to our desktop, and then we're gonna input that property code, right?
Yep, from the
And
property.
we'll use that to open ERIC.
Yep. So as soon as you change this line, as long as you put this to the right location on your computer, you'll be able to come up here and hit all these buttons, these play buttons, and it will create all these tables for you. Like you don't have to go in and change everything else. It is automatic.
So it's gonna create what you just did right now.
Yep, as long as you don't go in and change any of this other code down here, unless you want to play with it, which is fine too, and I highly encourage that.
No, I'm glad you're just showing us how to do it, but I'm not touching anything.
But yeah, other than this line right here, as soon as if you have the right pathway, everything else will run right. That's part of the reason why computer code is used so much like this in data management rather than just Excel or whatever, because so in my job, I create annual reports on drug overdose. So what I could do is I create those reports in R, and then if I'm not in the same job next year, the person after me can come in and take my R code and maybe change a few things like this so that way it works on their computer, and then create the exact same report that I already created without having to go through and create new tables or graphs or anything like that. So that's why computer code like this is really helpful for our purposes of data management and data science. And then it's also helpful because if you have like a continuously updating data set like we do, like with death certificate data, right? We get new death certificates in every week. I can write code 1 month and then rerun that code 6 months from now, and it will do the exact same thing it did before, just now with all the new data entries that we have. So you can, keep running the same code, and it's always going to look the same, just with different numbers, kind of thing. So like if we wanted to run these exact same analysis on a different sample from Eric, if she were to send us a different CSV, all we would need to do is change the CSV, make sure all the variable names are still the same, and it would run it on that new data set and give us the new numbers.
Cool.
Yeah, so that's why this skill is pretty helpful. So I hope that makes it feel like it's kind of worthwhile learning too.
Oh no, trust me, this is like so helpful.
So yeah, so these are the data chunks, just saying incorporate it into R. I guess you can code in this regular little bit of text right here. So let's say I wanted it to enter in a date whenever, so I wanted it to say like automatically include the date of when I ran the report, right? I could go in and tell it to run this command, system date.
Oh, it's frozen again.
Okay, am I still frozen or is the screen frozen?
Oh, there you go. Okay, we're good.
So if I put in these special chunks right here, so this is the little ellipses up on the tilde key that we use down here, and then R, because we say we could also program this in Java language, so we gotta tell it what language we're using. And then we use an R command, in this case, system date. So if I were to knit this into a document, if I were to string all this together, rather than this saying R system date in the document, this would be today's date, essentially. So like whenever I run reports, 2 or 3 reports a day at work, I never have to update that date every day. R does it automatically for me. It automatically dates all of my my papers for me, essentially, just from whenever I ran it. So you can have R code in your general text, but most of the time your R code is going to go in these code chunks. And that's what this is. It's a code chunk. It's also helpful to have chunks, like I said, with these right here. So rather than, having to highlight exactly what it is I want it to run, so like in this code chunk, if I only wanted to run this last vector, or these last 2 vectors, I could highlight them and then hit Control Enter and run. Or if I want to run this whole chunk, I can go up top and run this rather than trying to highlight them all and run each separately. But it's just different options for you to determine how you want to run your code. All right, so we created our categorical tables. You see the $ here. Again, that just means that this is the variable, that's the variable name. And then we're going to calculate percents. So this is going to be a little bit of my novice. I know there's a way to have it automatically do all the percents for you in a table like we had with the contingency table. And I'm going to look it up, and if I find it a good way, I'll make sure you get the code in case you want to use that way in your analysis later on. But for now, this is a fairly easy way to calculate, to go from the counts in this table to the percentages and to have R do the math for you. So it's, try to do as little work as possible. So in this one, what we've done is we've nested it all first within this print command. So it's just telling it to print everything within these print parentheses. Okay, does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So when we knit this document, we're telling it to print whatever table it's creating under here. So we've nested it within the print command. We're creating this new data frame called BMI table. We're creating it out of data. We're piping it to what is this group by command. So we're saying we want all the categories for this weight variable. That's what we're grouping it by. So if we were to not give this group by command, if we just went straight to the count command, it would just give us one number and counting all the entries in this entire data set, right? So if we just did BMI table data count, that's just going to tell us how many entries are in our data set. If we set group by and then count, it tells us how many are in each of the weight group categories. So this table, if we were to just run this, here we got to close our parentheses for the print. So we can just run this part of the command, and it's going to print us a little table down there. You can see this is the same as that other table we had earlier, right? Where it's just the count for each of the groups, except if we make it like this, we could actually work with it like a data table, whereas this was a vector up here, right? So this is just a vector, just a list of numbers. This is a data table that we can actually open up over here. What did I call it? BMI table. So I can actually go to BMI table over here and open it up and play with it just like any of my other data, right? So I couldn't do that with the other ones. I could publish those in a paper, make them format them nice and pretty, but this one I can actually work with the data. So if we want to manipulate these numbers at all, this is how we have to create those tables. But as you can see, there's just a whole bunch of different ways to do the exact same thing in R. So we created that table. Let's get rid of this extra parenthesis. All right, so we had our data vertical, but in order to manipulate each of these as a separate variable, we have to pivot the table. Do y'all know what a pivot table is? So a pivot table, you can pivot wider or pivot longer. Right now, our data is in long format, right? So it's got a different count or a different entry for each of the weight groups, right? We want to pivot it though. So we want all of these weight groups to be variables, and we want their counts underneath them. Okay, does that make sense? Whereas if we were pivoting from a wide table to a long table, we would take this variable, this variable, this variable, put them under as the entries under one named variable, and take all the counts, manipulate them, and put them into a single column. So that's what a pivot table is. It's just reorganizing the shape of your data. So for this one, if we pivot, we're saying that our variable names from are coming from weight, the variable called weight. And we're saying our values are coming from the variable called n, which we created when we hit count. So if we run this, we will see, once it runs it, then now we have that same data horizontally. But we can still work with it like a data frame up here.
So question.
Yeah.
So we chose weight. That's the variable that we're creating a table for, and then like categorizing it. Did you choose weight because she asked us to, or is that the one that you chose?
I just chose one of our random variables that had multiple
just to show us how we could put it together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
You could have done this with age or with gender. You couldn't do it with age. It'd have to be a categorical variable, but you could do this with any of the other categorical variables in there.
Okay, because I think in the assignment she asked, please select the variables which you think will be important for you to consider. So what does she mean by we did not talk about DAGs in this class? Does that mean that's another way of like putting that into a table?
But that's not code. DAG stands for a directed acyclic graph. And this is what a DAG looks like. So it's basically just a way of showing cause and effect from your exposure to your outcome. But like she said, she hasn't taught y'all this. So she doesn't actually expect y'all to make a DAG. It's just it's just a way of illustrating how your exposure relates to your outcome through its mediators and covariates. So these are our mediators right here, right? They mediate the relationship between smoking status and CHD because, right, so smoking status causes hypertension, which raises your risk for coronary heart disease. I'm pretty sure I froze again, but if y'all can hear me.
So you said something about your outcomes and then you froze.
Yes, so these are kind of just a way of illustrating the causal relationship between your exposure and your outcome. So we have our exposure smoking status here. And then we're showing how that smoking status, this is what we're investigating right here, is how much smoking status relates to coronary heart disease. So this is like where a question mark would be. But smoking status also affects coronary heart disease by raising hypertension, triglycerides, cholesterol, affecting your weight, that sort of thing. So even though like weight group and even though smoking has opposite effects on weight group and hypertension, because some people use smoking cigarettes as a weight management tool, they still go here because it's still mediating the effect between smoking status and coronary heart disease. Our goal in our analysis is to determine how much of the relationship between smoking status and heart disease is just due to smoking status and not due to the influence of these other variables up here. So these are mediators, they're in between this relationship, whereas these are covariates where they affect both smoking status and coronary heart disease, right? Like sex varies with, or your smoking status varies by sex, your risk of coronary heart disease varies by sex, that's why that goes up there. But she's not expecting y'all to do an actual DAG. But that's what she's talking about there.
Okay.
She just wanted some visual representation. Even if you just had, you could probably just do it with 3 categories. Just do exposure right here, mediator, covariates in the middle, outcome on the right, and you should be good to go. Because that would get basically the same point across, just with slightly less detail. And I think that's all she's wanting to look for. She wants to know that you know what you need to control for when you do your analyses later on.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what that section means.
Okay, so right now, what we were looking at, that table, that's basically just like we're looking at all the different characteristics that can contribute to like the outcome.
Yeah. So you're picking your exposure, whatever it is you want to study. You're picking everything else, basically all the other variables in the data set, but everything else that's going to vary alongside this and could be affecting the relationship between exposure and outcome.
Okay, so smoking status, that is something that you chose to address, like one of the questions that she asks, or that's just the same exposure status that we're all looking at?
That's what I chose. You could pick any exposure. You could put hypertension right here, and you would have, smoking status would then go up here, right? Because hypertension doesn't affect smoking status, but smoking status affects hypertension and coronary heart disease.
I see what you mean.
Or you could have weight over here, in which case you'd have smoking status up here and hypertension still in the middle and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's just what this graph is showing.
But we don't need these.
Right, you don't need this specific graph in this level of detail. She just wants to see that you understand that there's going to be an exposure over here, there's going to be covariates and mediators, and then there's going to be an outcome. That's what she's looking for. I'm pretty sure.
So we could all, let's hypothetically, if we all chose the same one, of course, we would have to create our own version of this, of course.
Yes.
Okay.
And this is obviously just very basic done in PowerPoint. There's nothing fancy over here.
No, it's pretty straightforward. That's what I'm saying. Okay.
The concept when you're actually like talking about DAGs and determining where stuff goes can get a little complicated, but this is a very straightforward topic. We're not dealing with some sort of huge complex disease that's got so many mediators and covariates and stuff over here.
Okay. So then going back to R,
Mhm.
while we're looking at those characteristics in like right now, how we had to like direct. So we're summarizing the data, then we choose each variable, and then we separate that out. So right here, when we're choosing BMI, is that one you're just choosing to show us, or is that like one of like the 5 different categories of characteristics she wants us to showcase?
It's an option. It's one of the possibilities that you could choose. But
Okay.
I just chose a random variable here that I thought this table would make sense to you. So if we go into where my project is over here, so this is the code that I used to generate that table.
Yeah.
You can see all the libraries I used for that. I have code under here where I first created the data set, and this is the exact same data set in the data that I'm about to send you. But then I created these 2 additional data sets, a clean one and a missing one. So this is the data set I created where I got rid of anybody who has missing in any of these variables. So this little bar right here, that means or. So I'm saying is NA age, is NA is the command for saying not available or missing. That's how they appear in R as NAs. So we're saying we've got our exclamation point, so everything that doesn't fit within these is NA age. So if anybody has an age value that's NA, or BMI value that's NA, or cholesterol value that's NA, they're going to get put into this data set, as long as they don't have any of these variables. So now I've got my clean data set, and then I've got my missing data set. So you can see they both come from data, they both have the same source, but they're basically the opposites of each other. So this is the data set that has everybody who doesn't have any missing, and this is the data set that has people who have a whole bunch of stuff missing. This is the data set of people who have at least one of these variables missing. And this is where I reference the vector, right, cat var. So I'm saying anything in this vector cat var that equals missing. So any of these variables right here that are set to missing will be included in this. So that's how I do my summary. I do a summary table on all of the data, that's step 1. But then later on, she's gonna ask you to do summaries for the clean and the missing data. And she's gonna ask you to do a t-test between those 2 to show that there's not statistically significant differences between those 2 groups. And I should begin to the t-test in just a second. Because I do have that in this code for how to run a t-test. I don't have it for how to run it on different data sets, but I know you can just combine the 2 data sets into one to do an analysis. This is to summarize our continuous variables. And there's this command called summarize right here. And there's also like summarize at if you're doing a whole bunch of variables with just one type of summary rather than a whole bunch of summaries on one variable. There's summarize if you only want to summarize certain variables. But the summarize command is what we're going to use to summarize our continuous variables. We create our variable name right here. We set it equals to, we're creating the variable, so it's just the 1 equal sign. And then this is a command, mean. The mean command, we're operating it on BMI. So we're saying that this variable right here, mean BMI, is going to be equal to the mean of the BMI variable from this data set up here. So that's how we summarize our continuous data. Let me put this print here so you can see what this looks like. Add my extra parentheses and run that. This really should not be taking that long. Okay, come on. Okay, there we go. So now we see our continuous variable. We've summarized it. We've grouped it by gender. So each of these groups is the mean for each of these genders right here. So if we had excluded this group by, we would just have 1 row for the entire data set. And so this